The Panama Canal is a critical artery for global trade, connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and saving ships weeks of travel. Every day, vessels carrying cars, electronics, grain, and fuel pass through, keeping prices stable worldwide. Any disruption, be it drought, political tension, or conflict, sends shockwaves through global supply chains. The canal's smooth operation is essential. When it falters, the world feels it instantly. Its strategic value makes it a focal point for geopolitical power plays. Since Panama took control in 1999, the world has relied on its promise to keep the canal open to all. But in late 2024 and early 2025, that promise was tested as tensions threatened the very foundation of global maritime trade. The world watched, knowing the fate of this 51-mile waterway could impact every continent. In late 2024, Donald Trump, then both former and incoming U.S. president, publicly floated the idea of reclaiming American control over the Panama Canal. His remarks, delivered with characteristic bravado, immediately sparked controversy and debate both at home and abroad. The suggestion was not just a passing comment, it was a signal that U.S. foreign policy toward Panama was about to take a dramatic turn. His statements, amplified in a Wall Street Journal article and his 2025 inaugural address, put the world on edge. International media outlets ran headlines speculating about a new era of American interventionism, while global leaders scrambled to assess the potential fallout. By March, the Trump administration formally notified Congress of plans to reclaim the canal, citing rising tolls and growing Chinese influence in the region as justification. The move was framed as a matter of national security and economic necessity, with officials warning of dire consequences if the U.S. did not act. The Pentagon was ordered to draft military contingency plans, preparing for a range of possible scenarios. Behind closed doors, military leaders weighed the risks of escalation and the potential for conflict in Central America. In April, Trump announced a significant U.S. troop deployment to Panama, pressuring the Panamanian government. The show of force was intended to demonstrate American resolve and deter any resistance. President José Raúl Mulino condemned the threats but, under mounting pressure, agreed to an increased U.S. troop presence and other concessions. The negotiations were tense, with Panama's leaders caught between appeasing Washington and maintaining national dignity. Panama also granted U.S. warships discounted tolls and withdrew from China's Belt and Road Initiative, a move that signaled a dramatic shift in its foreign policy alignment. These moves were seen as major concessions from a small nation facing a superpower. For Panama, the stakes were nothing less than its sovereignty and economic future. Publicly, Mulino insisted on Panama's sovereignty, but the reality was a delicate balancing act. He faced criticism at home and skepticism abroad, as many questioned whether Panama could truly stand up to U.S. demands. The crisis exposed the immense leverage the U.S. still holds over Panama, both economically and militarily. The world was reminded of the canal's enduring strategic importance. Behind the scenes, Panama's government scrambled to avoid outright conflict while trying to preserve its independence. Every decision was fraught with risk, and the pressure was relentless. The world watched as a regional dispute threatened to become a global crisis. International organizations called for restraint, but tensions continued to rise. The canal's future suddenly seemed uncertain, with global trade and regional stability hanging in the balance. The U.S. justified its increasingly aggressive stance in Latin America by pointing to China's rapidly growing economic and strategic presence in Panama, a country that controls one of the world's most important shipping routes. Chinese and Hong Kong-based firms now operate major ports at both ends of the canal, raising alarms in Washington about potential foreign control over this critical waterway. U.S. officials feared that, in the event of a conflict or diplomatic crisis, China could use these companies to disrupt canal access for American ships, threatening U.S. military and commercial interests. The canal is vital for U.S. naval mobility and global trade, making any significant foreign influence a perceived threat to national security and economic stability. In response to these concerns, Panama launched an audit of the Chinese-run ports to assess their operations and reassure both domestic and international audiences. Panamanian leaders also discussed the possibility of selling the ports to U.S.-led investors, hoping to ease American anxieties and maintain strong ties with Washington. These moves aim to appease Washington without alienating China, as Panama sought to walk a diplomatic tightrope between two superpowers. Critics, however, argued that the fears were exaggerated. pointing out the Panama Canal Authority's independence, professionalism, and long-standing commitment to neutrality. Many warned that heavy-handed U.S. pressure could backfire, pushing Panama and other Latin American nations even closer to China's economic orbit. The dispute highlighted the region's ongoing struggle to balance relations with two global powers, each vying for influence and strategic advantage. For Panama, every decision risked alienating one side or the other, making diplomacy a constant balancing act. The canal became a battleground for influence far beyond its banks, symbolizing the broader competition between the US and China for dominance in the 21st century. In January 2025, the Panama Canal Authority implemented steep toll hikes, some as high as 200% for certain ships. The increases were meant to fund critical infrastructure, including new water reservoirs after a devastating drought. Panama argued the hikes were necessary for the canal's long-term survival. The U.S. saw them as an economic attack, claiming they would hurt American exporters and drive up prices. The toll dispute became intertwined with security concerns, fueling U.S. demands for greater control. Globally, shipping companies scrambled to adjust, with some seeking alternative routes. The ACP faced the challenge of balancing revenue needs with keeping the canal attractive to customers. The toll hikes tested that balance, adding economic tension to an already volatile situation. The world's reliance on the canal was suddenly in sharp focus. Every decision in Panama rippled through global markets. The stakes had never been higher. For Panamanians, the canal is far more than a waterway. It's a symbol of hard-won sovereignty, a testament to their struggle for self-determination and national pride. The return of U.S. troops and government concessions sparked outrage and protests across the country as people from all walks of life poured into the streets to make their voices heard. Labor unions, students, and nationalists condemned the government's actions as a betrayal of Panama's independence, demanding accountability and a reversal of the controversial decisions. President Mulino's approval ratings plummeted amid accusations of caving to U.S. pressure, with critics claiming he had put foreign interests above Panama's own. Some argued that the concessions were necessary to avoid economic disaster or international isolation, while others saw any compromise as an unacceptable surrender of national dignity. The crisis exposed deep divisions within Panamanian society. Pragmatists feared U.S. retaliation and economic fallout, while nationalists demanded Panama stand firm no matter the cost. The debate was not just about policy or politics, but about the very soul of the nation and what it means to be Panamanian. Memories of past U.S. intervention, military occupations, political interference, and lost lives fueled anger and calls for resistance, echoing through generations. Panama now found itself caught between asserting its independence and facing the harsh reality of American power and influence. The canal crisis became a test of the nation's resolve, a defining moment that would reveal the true strength of Panama's unity and determination. The world watched as Panama faced not just a diplomatic standoff, but a profound internal struggle, wrestling with its own history and future. The outcome of this crisis would shape Panama's future for years to come, influencing how new generations understand their place in the world. The fate of the canal was now inseparable from the country's sense of self, forever linking Panama's identity to its most iconic landmark. The Panama Canal's history is one of ambition, struggle, and national pride. Built by the U.S. after supporting Panama's independence from Colombia, the canal was under American control for most of the 20th century. The Canal Zone split Panama in two, fueling decades of resentment and protest. The 1977 Torrijos-Carter treaties set the stage for Panama to regain control, culminating in the 1999 handover. For Panamanians, this was a triumph over colonialism and a defining moment of sovereignty. Since then, the Panama Canal Authority has managed the waterway with efficiency and professionalism. The successful expansion in 2016 proved Panama's capability. U.S. threats in 2025 were seen as an insult to this legacy. The canal's story is not just about engineering, but about a nation's fight for dignity. That history shaped every reaction to the new crisis. In Washington, the Trump administration saw its actions as defending American interests against Chinese encroachment. The canal was viewed through the lens of great power rivalry. The administration cited the Neutrality Treaty as justification for intervention, interpreting it broadly. Domestic politics played a role, with "we built it, we paid for it," resonating with Trump's base. The threats were as much about projecting strength at home as about real security concerns. Critics argued this approach risked alienating allies and violating international law. For the White House, the risks were worth it to maintain dominance over a global choke point. the canal became a stage for America's broader struggle with China. In Panama City, U.S. threats were seen as a violation of sovereignty and international law. Panamanians argued their management of the canal had been exemplary since 1999. The government rejected claims of Chinese control, insisting port operations posed no threat to canal neutrality. Toll hikes were defended as necessary for maintenance and climate resilience. Panama cited the Torrijos-Carter treaties, which guarantee its right to operate and defend the canal. Any U.S. intervention would, in Panama's view, breach these agreements and international norms. President Mulino faced the impossible task of appeasing both a proud public and a powerful neighbor. Concessions were made to avoid disaster, but at a cost to national pride. Panama's leaders walked a tightrope, trying to protect their most vital asset. The crisis left the country wary, but determined to defend its hard-won independence. By mid-2025, the immediate crisis had eased, but tensions lingered. The uneasy truce between the U.S. and Panama is fragile, with core disagreements unresolved. The risk of renewed conflict remains high, especially if political winds shift or new disputes arise. Panama may continue balancing U.S. demands with its own sovereignty, but resentment could grow. The crisis could push other Latin American nations closer to China, undermining U.S. influence. A return to diplomacy and mutual respect is the best hope for stability. The canal's future depends on cooperation, not coercion. The events of 2025 were a stark reminder of the canal's geopolitical fragility. The world will keep watching, knowing the stakes for global trade are immense. The Panama Canal's fate remains a barometer for the health of international order.